Now, you might be thinking, Nathan, why aren't you talking about the vosotros form? Just like in math, as we have formulas, in Spanish, we have the same exact idea. Now, don't worry if you hate math. I also hated math, but the formulas in Spanish are pretty digestible. Spanish verb tenses, one of the most dreaded aspects of learning the language. But in today's video, I'm going to show you how to master Spanish verb tenses quickly so you can start navigating the language with confidence. Just like in English, Spanish has 3 times: the past, the present, and the future. Now, there are many different conjugations within each of these times. But here's what I will say. When it comes to learning Spanish verb tenses, it's most important to learn the present tense first. Now, we also have different moods. So we have what we call the indicative, the subjunctive, and the imperative moods. The idea here is if you can learn the regular verb conjugations in the present tense and get those down, you are going to be golden. Now, after that, you can learn the future, and I'm going to give you a little secret on how to quickly and easily master using the future tense in Spanish. And finally, you'll work on the past. Now, typically, the past is what trips up students the most, more specifically, the preterite and imperfect. Very quickly, let me explain to you the idea of using the future tense in Spanish because it's actually the easiest. I'm going to give you a little cheat code. While we do have the simple and informal future in Spanish, I'm going to teach you the easiest way to use the future in Spanish. For example, voy a bailar, vas a comer. Okay, so we're using the infinitive verb ir, meaning to go, plus a, meaning to, and an infinitive verb. Now, an infinitive verb in Spanish just means a verb that hasn't been conjugated. So, for example, hablar, comer, vivir. These are all infinitive verbs. So instead of you having to learn, for example, the idea of hablaré, comerás, this kind of future tense, which is the idea of I will speak, you will eat. Now you can just use this idea of ir plus a plus infinitive. Now you can also take the verb ir and put it into different tenses. So instead of saying voy or vas, which is in the present, we could say iba a, ibas a, I was going to, or you were going to. Okay, so that's a very, very quick and easy way to start using the future in Spanish. Ir plus a plus infinitive. Now, if you're not familiar with conjugation charts in Spanish, these are gold. And I highly, highly, highly recommend that you start using conjugation charts today. Now, what are conjugation charts? Well, like I said, in Spanish, we have 3 different kinds of verbs: AR, ER, and IR. So remember, verbs that end with either AR, ER, or IR are infinitive verbs. Hablar, comer, vivir. These are all infinitive verbs. For this example and in this video, I'm only going to show you regular verbs. Now, we also have what we call irregulars in Spanish. What's the difference between a regular verb and an irregular verb? Well, a regular verb follows regular conjugation patterns, whereas in irregular verbs, they follow irregular conjugation patterns. So in Spanish, the great thing is that we have rules when it comes to conjugation. Just like in math, as we have formulas, in Spanish, we have the same exact idea. Now, don't worry if you hate math. I also hated math, but the formulas in Spanish are pretty digestible. So for regular AR verbs in the present tense, we have the new verb endings of o, has, a, amos, han. Yo hablo, tú hablas, él, ella, usted habla, nosotros hablamos, and ellos, ellas, ustedes hablan. Now, the reason that we even conjugate verbs in the first place is so that we don't have to always use subject pronouns if we don't want to. What are subject pronouns? These are the idea of I, you, he, she. So yo, tú, él, ella. So instead of having to say yo hablo, yo blah blah blah, yo blah blah blah, we can just say hablo, como, bailo. Okay, so that is why we conjugate verbs in Spanish. Now for regular ER verbs in the present tense, we'll have o, es, hemos, en. So taking a look at the verb comer. Yo como. Tú comes. Él, ella, usted come. Nosotros comemos. Ellos, ellas, ustedes comen. Okay, so once again, for ER verbs that are regular in the present tense, we have o, es, hemos, en. For regular IR verbs in the present tense, it's extremely similar. In fact, there's only one change. So for these, we have o, es, imos, en. So the only change is in the nosotros person. So for example, yo vivo, tú vives, él, ella, usted vive, nosotros vivimos, ellos, ellas, ustedes viven. Now, you might be thinking, Nathan, why aren't you talking about the vosotros form? And that's because most students typically want to learn a Spanish coming from Latin America, and I myself never learned the vosotros form. Now, what I will say about this is that when I was living in Spain for 3 months, when native Spanish speakers from Spain would speak to me using the vosotros form, I could understand perfectly fine. However, I couldn't necessarily reciprocate in a practical and perfect way. If you want to become conversationally fluent in Spanish as fast as possible, check out the Fluent Spanish Speaker Academy. Here's what some of our current members have to say. Tam, one of my most motivated students, says, I felt like I understood more Spanish in 1 week than the entire month that I had spent trying to figure out everything on my own. This course made it easy for a busy person like myself to learn Spanish efficiently while still having fun. We stand behind our program with a 30-day full refund policy. If you're not happy within 30 days, we'll give you your money back, no questions asked. Now, when it comes to the past tense, this is typically the most tricky for students, especially because we have the preterite and the imperfect. Now, very quickly, what I always tell students, the golden rule between using the preterite and the imperfect is that the preterite is for one-time actions in the past, whereas the imperfect is for ongoing actions in the past. So, for example, if I said, yo bailé, which is the preterite, that would mean I danced. Whereas if I had said, yo bailaba, this means I was dancing, or I used to dance. How do we know when it means I was dancing or I used to dance? It's just based off of context clues. So for example, yo bailaba todos los fines de semana would be I used to dance every weekend. Or if I had said yo bailaba cuando mi mamá entró a mi cuarto. I was dancing when my mom came into my room. So it's just based off of context. Now, in this video, we're not going to go over the conjugation charts for preterite and imperfect. However, I highly recommend that you look these up online, or you can go to my website, SpanishWithNate.com. In my Fluent Spanish Speaker Academy, go over how to conjugate verbs in the preterite, how to conjugate verbs in the imperfect, and how to distinguish between when to use which. Now, like I had mentioned earlier, we also have what we call irregular verbs in Spanish. And the unfortunate thing is that a lot of the times, irregular verbs are regularly used. Remember that a verb is irregular if it follows irregular conjugation patterns. For example, the verb ser, meaning to be, is considered an irregular verb because it follows irregular conjugation patterns. Let me give you an example. We just learned the present tense conjugation for regular verbs in the ER, right? So regular ER verbs. So the verb comer conjugated in the yo would be yo como. But the verb ser, which is technically also an ER verb, would not be yo so, because according to the rule, it would be so. But it's an irregular verb, and therefore we say yo soy. And then next would be tú eres, and then él, ella, usted es. So that is a very common irregular verb. Now we also have other common irregular verbs like estar, tener, hacer, ver. These are all irregular verbs that we commonly use. Once again, we're not going to go over irregular conjugation patterns in this video. However, if you want to learn about them, go to my website, SpanishWithNate.com, and you can check it out there. Now, the final key to mastering Spanish verb tenses is to put them into use. Now, I know that sounds like common sense, but I am always surprised at how often students aren't speaking the language or listening to the language or reading the language. So that is the final key here. Study in your grammar book or course, so how to use verbs in the preterite or imperfect or in the future or in the present, but then put them into use. I highly recommend, if you're not already, to listen to Spanish every day. This is going to be huge for your Spanish learning progress. If you're listening to the language all the time, you're going to say, gosh, I keep hearing the word corazón all the time, or I keep hearing soy or eres all the time. This is huge. So put that into practice. Then start speaking the language. Make it a point to say, okay, when I'm speaking Spanish with someone or myself or whoever it may be, I'm going to make it a point to use the preterite, or I'm going to make it a point to use the imperfect. And also try to read the language. Now, if you don't like reading, a lot of the times in the modern day, reading and writing come through text messages. So, for example, in my Spanish Speaker Academy, we have a private Discord community, and this is where students not only get their reading and writing practice, but also their speaking and listening practice, because we hop on group calls and things like that. So also find a community, find a group of people, especially if you're learning on your own, who can motivate you and inspire you to keep learning the language. Well, there you have it. That is how you can master verb tenses in the Spanish language. I hope that this video has helped you. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to leave me a comment down below. And if you'd like to learn more Spanish than me, go to SpanishWithNate.com. Bueno, muchas gracias. Espero que tengas muy bonito día y estaremos en contacto. Adiós, cuídate mucho.